let's really bring to life exactly how funders and investors like yourselves can put smart, impactful dollars to work in solutions that are really moving the needle around the globe. So some of you might already be familiar with what you're seeing on the screen here, which is a global food loss and waste investment report. This was a large collaborative effort that was developed for release at COP28 in Dubai. The goal of the report was really to give funders an understanding of the challenges and opportunities within global food loss and waste reduction efforts, providing opportunities for where they can put their capital resources to work to have the greatest impact. ReFed was really grateful for the opportunity to work alongside so many knowledgeable specialists and strategists and subject matter experts, more than 75, in fact, from all over the world, thanks to funding from the Bezos Earth Fund and IKEA Foundation, Robertson Foundation, and the Betsy and Jesse Fink Family Foundation, which in the end, this report really brought to life more than $300 million in ready-to-fund investments to transform failing food systems and deliver major climate, economic, and social impact. So any meaningful progress to significantly reduce food loss and waste at scale will, of course, have to come from the national level, but just as importantly, also from subnational. And as such, these $300 million in shovel-ready investments that were outlined in the report come from primarily 6 countries where work is already underway, those being South Africa, Kenya, Indonesia, the United States, China, and Mexico. And one being Brazil, where early efforts demonstrate an opportunity worth highlighting and role modeling. So of course, as the world's population grows from $8 to $10 billion by 2050, it's really imperative that efforts to accelerate this top solution to climate change, as we heard Project Drawdown mention, not only take into consideration these cultural and regional nuances, but also coordinate efforts in the areas of greatest need and potential, which is why the report really calls out these 5 cross-border action areas for investment that any investor can support to realize a myriad of co-benefits beyond just waste diversion, whether that be reducing greenhouse gas emissions, saving consumers money and increasing farmer and business profits, restoring ecosystems and biodiversity, or ensuring that those that are experiencing hunger and food insecurity in our communities are really having access to healthy and nutritious food. So I've outlined these 5 action areas for investment on the slide here. First, we're talking about reducing food loss on farm and in production. Second, changing how the private sector operates. Third, changing consumer behavior and culture. Fourth, setting policy to drive action. And then 5th, supporting the champions and the coordinators that are at work behind the scenes. And actually, for the remainder of today's webinar, I am thrilled to have several leading experts in their respective fields from Factory Ventures, GreenPod Labs, Winnow, World Wildlife Fund, and the Global Foodbanking Network, who will be joining me to speak more on these, how they're approaching the investment area either as a funder themselves or via the solution that their organization has developed or is actively deploying on the ground when they're fighting food loss and waste each and every day. So it's my hope that these 6 expert presentations, which you're about to hear, will hopefully inspire you to consider how your own investment thesis intersects with food loss and waste action areas, and that they give you really concrete examples of how to put your capital that you manage to work. So launching into our first action area for investment, perfectly good food can and is often, unfortunately, left in fields around the world for a variety of reasons. Whether that doesn't meet consumer specs, there are unexpected changes in supply and demand, or due to a lack of reliable and consistent access to markets, which unfortunately, can make it unprofitable to harvest. And that's really assuming you have access to the labor that you need to harvest in the first place. Disease or inadequate on-farm support can also lead to food loss and waste, as well as inadequate transport and storage, like cold storage. What's really important to remember also is that about 1/3 of the world's food is produced by smallholder farmers who themselves are often food insecure, unfortunately. So some examples of solutions worth investing in and considering for smallholder farmers in developing countries in particular can include changes in on-farm practices like improved storage and harvesting techniques and better information about and improved access to markets. the ability to keep food cold, or frankly, to completely leapfrog the need for cold storage, as you're about to hear in one example that's happening in India, is an important part of holistic supply chain development too. So to learn more about this, I am about to invite two speakers to the webinar. One is an investor who has quite a bit of experience funding reductions in on-farm food loss and supporting smallholder farmers. And another is a solution provider from India who is working to extend shelf life of various commodities. So let me pass the mic over to Morgan, who is the co-founder and managing principal at Factory Ventures. And then you'll be hearing from Deepak, who is the founder and CEO of GreenPod Labs. Welcome, Morgan. The floor is yours.
All right, Alex, thanks very much. And good to be talking with all of you this evening, my time at least. And have a few slides that I'll go through quickly, but excited to also engage in the Q&A with you guys because it's a big topic. You can go ahead and start the factory slides. This just real quick comment on this slide. I think it's so important that we keep scale in mind as we're trying to do impact. Fairly obvious, I suppose. But as an early stage investor in technologies, I've been reminded that it's probably worth repeating a few things just to dispel maybe some myths of the sector. This photo is just one of our companies in the mobility space that's put 3,000 electric motorcycles on the road in Rwanda. It's really fun to see these things scale. And we are a impact investor. And if you go to the next slide, we can explain a little bit about how we do that in kind of a unique way of really trying to be thoughtful in how we deploy capital and really create opportunities because working in emerging markets is really about not just finding opportunities, but actually creating opportunities and doing the matchmaking. And so just really grateful for the organizations today putting this on. I think this is a great example of what needs to happen in these disconnected markets. But we do, at Factory, we do both kind of the thesis development side, and then we deploy capital against that thesis. And we, across our investments, are averaging greater than 20% IRR and greater than 2x multiple on invested capital at a portfolio level. And so while this is about impact and scale, I think it's great to let people know that this is possible against a portfolio approach, especially around the technology focus, which if you go to the next slide is where Factory is. And so we are a dispersed team. I'm talking to you from Colorado. We have offices and people in DC, London, Nairobi, Lagos, and have historically also worked a fair bit in Mumbai and Bangalore. And so we really try to look at global technologies and look for opportunities to take de-risked or de-risking technologies and help promote them in markets where maybe they wouldn't be first adopted. Often we have really interesting technologies and climate technologies around the world, and Africa and India are often last to see the impact of those technologies, and we don't think we have the time or patience to let that always be the case. And so that's the role that we play at Factory. I'll get into the meat of it here. On our next slide, we really work across a number of areas. Sorry, if you could go to the next slide for me. And is really driven by two things, climate technology and economic development. And I think that it is critical as we talk about post-harvest loss reduction in markets dominated by smallholder farmers. We can't disconnect the problems around post-harvest loss with the fundamental challenges of being a smallholder farmer, which means that you are, severely undercapitalized, disconnected from markets, and producing a small amount of crops and therefore limited ability to invest in solutions. And so the problem of post-harvest loss in emerging markets is part and parcel with the challenge of being a smallholder farmer. So if you go to the next slide, Factory launched a post-harvest loss innovation prize last summer, spring maybe. And I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the results of that prize. I'm also happy in the Q&A to talk about our experience investing in this space. We've invested in S4S in India, a drying company, cold hubs in Spira Farms, cooling cold chain companies in East and West Africa, GreenPod Labs, who you'll hear from Deepak right after this. Clean Crop, Crow Farm, Cinch, Figure, AgSol. These are all companies, if you've heard of, that we've invested in working in India, East Africa, West Africa. Trying to continue to expand our search for innovation in this space, wherever you might find it. We launched a prize as one of the ways that we try and gather intel and also raise up, I think, interesting opportunities in the space. We had almost 800 submissions to the Innovation Prize, and through a process narrowed that down to 10 interesting technologies and companies that we thought were worth sharing with the world. Deepak was ultimately number one out of that group, and so I throw this slide up just to preview what an exciting opportunity GreenPod Labs is. But a few things that we learned from running this innovation prize, in addition to maybe some of the lessons learned in investing in this space over the last decade, on the next slide. Just what's interesting is when we launched this prize, we had solutions come from all over the world. And we did ask for country, not just where things were founded, but basically where they're active. And obviously we're focused in screening on emerging markets. But some things that you probably would expect between Nigeria, Kenya, and India, you get over half of the applicants to this program. But then on the solution side, really a diverse and wide range of interesting technologies, really targeting different stages in the value chain. And so if you look at the next slide, you can also see what our RFP was, how it was broken down. Obviously, a huge amount of the solutions were targeting smallholder farmers. Some were looking further down the value chain, and most of those were at the farm gate level. I think, one comment about that, well, maybe I'll just go to the last slide and show one more stat before I go into a little bit of discussion around it. The other thing that we asked, which was kind of interesting, is for the stage of the company, and most of these were companies, some were nonprofits or programs, but where is your monthly revenue versus your stage? And I think you can see that this is a really important sector, but also not a very mature sector. Very few technologies are actually producing, kind of the revenues that you would expect for maybe a Series A, B, or C stage company. Okay, if you go to the next slide, maybe I'll make a few comments quickly on what we saw. Again, both the learnings from this prize that we ran and the submissions that we got, the data that we have around that, but also just having worked in India and Africa for most of my career, and being a technologist by background, a few of the things that we've found. At the end of the day, farmers have to buy into your solution. And despite all the benefits or return on investment that we as investors or entrepreneurs see in our technologies, it's just so critical to start with the start, which is that farmers' risk budgets are spent. So they are, in every smallholder farmer I've ever met and talked to, is incredibly skeptical of any new technology. And they are right to be so. They are putting not just their livelihood on the line, but actually, actually their own food security on the line when they test out one of your technologies, because they are generally, operating at the poverty line, but also are growing the food they need to feed themselves. And so if you give a new technology or an intervention to a smallholder farmer, they are thinking about their literal survival, not just the potential upside. As we look across the value chain that Alex and Paul showed, it is this value chain. A lot of people are focusing in emerging markets on that last piece. And I would say there is absolutely the carbon piece of this. There is also a very strong argument around economic development and economic losses that happen in the value chain. And for everything that we try and do to invest in adaptation and resilience for smallholder farmers or anyone else in emerging markets, just access to capital is the number one indicator of whether or not you can recover from a climate event or adapt to a climate event. And so while the carbon piece is important, the other piece here is economic losses. In these markets, if you sell a tomato that is downgraded, it may eventually be a post-harvest loss because you feed that tomato to livestock instead of selling it, to a consumer in a city, or even better yet, exporting it for, on the international market. You may not have experienced as much loss, but the economic loss between the, highest value outcome of that tomato that you produced and the lowest value outcome is massive for those smallholder farmers. And so there's a fair amount of work going on in trying to link and aggregate farmers through digital platforms, and give farmers access to markets as a way to reduce post-harvest loss. Those are great, but also really challenging because of physical infrastructure gaps and just engaging with farmers in an authentic way all the way from growth to market and transacting inside a platform, not just advice. And so I would say we've learned a lot about digital platforms and the need for both digital and physical solutions to come together. Cold chain remains very difficult. And we've invested heavily in the cold chain space. And ultimately, it's absolutely necessary. We can't entirely leapfrog cold chain, but we have to be really targeted in our cold chain interventions and target high value crops. I mean, somehow Kenya can produce cut flowers that make their way to Europe, overnight, but we can't put a cold chain in for, fresh fish to get from Lake Victoria to Nairobi. So that's a target that's worth going after. There's a lot of fruits and vegetables that are very hard to focus cold chain on. There's just not the financial drivers to see that at the smallholder scale. Financing for all of these things is super critical, and that makes us really focus on affordability and for solutions that are very affordable at the farm gate. And, a lot of the things that we see when we look at technology globally, really only a very small fraction of those look interesting or impactful through that lens and these market realities. So maybe to end on a optimistic note, what are we excited about as investors in the space? And so if you can give me my last slide. There are a couple of areas I really want to highlight. Not surprisingly, and I won't go into what GreenPod Labs does because I don't want to steal Deepak's thunder, but generally the areas of coatings and packaging to reduce spoilage and damage from harvest to market is an area showing a lot of promise, very low cost, avoids cold chain. There are many different crops and many different solutions for different crops in different markets. And so this is a real innovation-friendly space, everything from modified air, atmosphere packaging to coatings. I also want to call out an area that we've invested in around post-harvest treatment. And so in grain and cereal crops in the US, those will be dried very quickly. It'll be stored in huge elevators. Grew up in South Dakota, so I can tell you all about ag, both in Africa and the US. And that will preserve that cereal crop. It'll also allow farmers to, arbitrage the market price. That doesn't exist for smallholder farmers. And one of the things that we're looking at are technologies that treat crops that have not been properly dried and may have things like aflatoxins in them to get them back up to export quality and regain that economic loss. And then just a potpourri or popcorn round of some other things that we think are really interesting. I've been looking at things like logistics platforms that actually incorporate some of that physical infrastructure into more of a software solution and bring that hybrid software and hardware solution to bear. So micro warehousing or processing as part of logistics platforms. There's still a lot of work, good work that can be done around drying as just, it doesn't make sense to move water. If you can pull water out of a value chain and maintain value, it makes a ton of sense. Field cooling, this is always a challenge because the biggest impact we can have in cold chain happens in removing the field heat and stopping the biological processes of whatever fruit or vegetable has just been picked and harvested. If you could do field cooling and remove field heat, you actually wouldn't need as much cold chain, but that's also where it's least obvious what the economic advantage is. So where the consumer sees the cooling is at the end point, and where it has the most benefit in the value chain is actually at the field. And then just some simple things around harvesting tools, because we see in Africa and India a lot of damage just in the harvest and shipping to even that first Mondi or distributor as a critical piece. So very quickly, a few slides and comments from our end, and I'll pass it over to Deepak.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Morgan. Thanks for the intro. Appreciate everyone being here. Thanks for joining in. So Deepak, founder CEO of GreenPod Labs. Can you move to the next slide? Yeah. So as Morgan mentioned, we primarily focus on post-harvest solutions for fruits and vegetables in developing markets like India and other developing markets. Next slide, please. I think a lot of previous speakers have talked about the problem, what these solutions are addressing, primarily solving the food waste, food loss, and within the specific of fruits and vegetables, post-harvest losses is what we are trying to solve. And what we have done is we have developed a biotechnology-based active packaging, which activates an immune system within the fruit and vegetable to slow down the ripening rate on one side and minimize any microbial growth on the other hand. Those are the two major reasons for spoilage in any fruit and vegetable, and that's what we address. Next slide, please. So the science what we're using, it's called plant defense mechanism. Plant has innate ability to defend itself to external stress, be it a biotic or abiotic stress. And there are volatile cues, what one impacted a plant can communicate to the neighboring plant that can activate its internal defense mechanism. And we learn that and then replicate this through our product. Next slide, please. So we do that in 3 steps. We identify specific defense mechanism in each fruit and vegetable. We develop a proprietary formulation for plant extracts and plant polymers. We use data to precisely customize for each fruit and vegetable. Next slide. Our product form comes in different forms. One of the forms are these sachets. These sachets contain plant-based volatiles. These volatiles, when it's released within the fruit or vegetable, it activates the internal immune system to extend the shelf life during the farm storage to transport to the end destination. Next slide. So I think this slide is very critical. I think the topic of like supporting in terms of funding and innovations is very critical, right? So far we've been lucky to receive a lot of like monetary support and receive a lot of support in terms of mentorship to scale our company to the next phase. And I feel like that's what helped us, let's say, build our 6 patents and several other innovations. De-risking of all these deep tech, deep science research is very critical by getting the right support in terms of funding. So I've been very fortunate to get all the support, and I feel this is what has defined us from the early stage of idea to the scale where we are right now. Next slide. So we've built the product for about 12 different crops, and we've commercially operating for about 4 different crops in India, and then scaling across multiple commodities. The product is customized for each fruit and vegetable. So the problem statement, what we understand for mangoes would be very different for what we look at for bananas. So we develop products customized for that commodity to extend the shelf life during the ambient temperatures from the farm to the destination market. Next slide. So showing few of our work, like we can extend the shelf life by a factor of 40 to 60% at ambient temperatures, 35 degrees Celsius, eliminating any need for cold storage, cold separation. And that's for multiple commodities like strawberries. Next slide. Mangoes. Next slide. Avocados and next slide. And grapes as well. So multiple other commodities. Next slide. Yeah. Not just the product functionality, we've also taken a lot of steps in terms of product safety. All our ingredients are natural, US FDA GRAS compliant, and 100% edible. And we make sure the product does not leave any residue on the crop, and it does not impact the nutrition of the crop as well. This is super critical for scaling up the commodity, scaling up the product, because if the product safety is not taken into high priority on day one, you have long-term sustainability problem as well. So not just providing the functionality, but also we are way more cautious on the product safety and how we are deployed. Next slide. So the customer segment, what we work with, we primarily focus on 3 different customer segments. We look at farmers, farmer cooperatives, the middlemen, the traders, exporters, the distributors, the middleman, and the end retail and e-commerce players. And our focus is heavily on the farmer cooperatives and the middlemen, where wherever there's a on-field requirement of storage or this logistics, where there's a long distance logistics involved, that's where the solution is being deployed right now. Next slide. So we primarily focus on wherever the customer is transporting or storing fruits and vegetables over 50 to 100 tons of fresh produce over a period of like 4 to 15 days at ambient temperatures. That's our focus point. And we focus on commodities, which is high value and high volume, where the impact of economic losses is very high. I think Morgan mentioned this on during this conversation, where more than the losses, the economic losses impacts smallholder farmers and the distributors a lot more. And we focus on that by focusing on commodities, which is high value and high volume. Next slide. So the product value, what we provide for our customers, it's bucketed into 4 things. We help them increase their shelf life by 40 to 60%. Our product works at a wider range of temperatures from 8 degrees Celsius to 40 degrees Celsius, making it in such a way that they don't need a cold storage, cold separation. We can reduce the spoilage by 80%, and we are providing a 3 to 4x ROI for each commodity what we're providing. And the 3 to 4x ROI is from 2 fronts. One, reducing the spoilage volume, moisture loss or the spoilage volume. And second, which is equally critical, is the quality degradation. During this transport, A grade quality moves to a B grade, and then B grade quality moves to C grade. According to the grading of the commodity, the pricing is achieved on the destination. So like making sure the quality degradation is not there, we're able to give them a higher revenue. Next slide. This is a short video of one of our customers who runs a farmer cooperatives, and then they were trying to transport mangoes. Can you play it? So this customer was trying to transport mangoes from down south India to North India, and then she used to get an 80 to 90% mango spoilage. So the significant economic losses because of which she was not able to sell the commodity, and we were able to reduce that to less than 1%. This is significant value add, right? So enabling the small and medium-sized customers to transport commodity to long distance is a game changer in a lot of ways. And these are the impacts what we have been creating in India and other developing markets. Next slide. Next slide. So I think the approach how we have taken to solve this problem is very different from all other companies. So we just don't provide the solution directly, but we understand the entire value chain from the farm to the fork and understand all the variables which is contributing towards the crop quality and shelf life. And that's how we determine what are the parameters we need to control to extend the shelf life. And this is the work what we have done for banana, where banana from the farm to export market, every variable what is responsible for the quality degradation and shelf life. And we've quantified all these variables to see like what all the control points we have to extend the shelf life. This is the depth what we have gone for any of our product development. Next. I'm going to skip these slides. Next 4 slides, just skip it. Yeah. So just to give an example of like how we approach this market, we're not just providing one solution for this ecosystem. We are providing multiple solutions for the ecosystem to make sure that we are solving the problem from every end. For example, like banana, we have actually provided 3 different solutions for banana customers, the farmers and farmer cooperatives. One solution which primarily slows down the ripening rate and provides a 60 to 70 days shelf life at like different temperatures. And we have a solution which can absorb moisture and make sure the internal boxes are maintained well and the quality is not degrading because of excess moisture. So we have that solution. And we also have a digital solution which can quantify the crop quality at the farm procurement level. And this gives them the edge of like distinguishing what is the quality they're procuring. Based on that, they can decide which market they can send. So we are looking at like multiple solutions for one value chain to provide an end-to-end results for these customers. Next slide. The commercial progress so far, we've been operating in India for a very long time now, and we've been working with close to about 200, 250 plus B2B commercial customers. And we've done several international pilots in Kenya, Philippines, Nepal, Bangladesh, Peru, and other markets as well. We commercially operate on 4 commodities: mangoes, banana, oranges, and grapes. And that's where we are scaling as well. Next. So we are a team of 23 people, and there's a quick slide on next slide. We strongly believe food waste, food loss is a preventable problem, and that's what we are working towards. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Looking forward for the Q&A. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Morgan and Deepak. Fascinating and obviously really critical to have you all on the line today to talk about on-farm food loss and waste. I'm actually going to skip this Q&A just to help us catch up some time, and we will definitely bring Morgan and Deepak back onto the screen for our final Q&A. But with that, let's hop ahead here so we can actually focus on the second global action area for investment, which is changing how the private sector operates. So people and the businesses who process and distribute, market and sell the food we know and love are key to reducing waste. It might be obvious. And excitingly, I'm happy to say that action on food loss and waste is actually growing in the private sector, whether we're talking for reasons of increasing revenue and reducing costs, or ambitions to meet environmental commitments, or even to just comply with regulatory requirements. In fact, about 80% of the world's 50 largest food businesses have made commitments to reduce their food loss and waste by 50% by 2030. And of the 40% or so companies that are reporting their data, they've actually reached their 30% reduction goal already, which is exciting, including Tesco and Kellogg's and Grupo Bimbo. That said, there's still a lot more room to go, and further solution adoption is needed. So some effective private sector solutions can range from things like simply just starting to measure and track the amount of food waste that's happening within a business's manufacturing operations, or adopting more high-tech solutions like AI-enabled supply and demand forecasting technologies. But there's some more low-tech solutions as well, like just joining voluntary agreements or public-private partnerships where businesses can actually pre-competitively collaborate with each other and actually pilot interventions, which you're going to hear a little bit about here from our next speakers. So to learn more, I'm going to turn it over again to two speakers. First, we're going to hear from Isabelle, who is a senior impact investing specialist at the World Wildlife Fund, and then Marc, who's founder of Winnow, both of who will discuss what they're doing to spark private sector adoption of effective, efficient, and scalable solutions that are win-win for profit, people, and the planet. So with that, I'll pass it to you, Isabelle.
Thank you, Alex. Great to be here with everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to share on what World Wildlife Fund is doing in this space. So next slide, please. I won't go into the details of this because I know my other co-panelists have gone into great depth talking about the impact of food loss and waste on the climate and food system in general. But as we've discussed, the food system is a tremendous driver of biodiversity loss, freshwater use, plastic in the environment, and it's one of the reasons why the World Wildlife Fund, as an environmental conservation organization, is really focused on the food system and helping shift it to be more sustainable. We have a variety of different programs really working on shifting the food system to be more sustainable, and as Alex mentioned, the private sector plays a critical part in facilitating this change. As Alejandro also mentioned earlier, we're seeing a lack of investment generally, lack of resources going towards food loss and waste, and that's where we as WWF are really trying to help support scale early stage companies that are bringing about new solutions, and at the same time really engage private sector on the adoption, scale up, and collaboration needed towards addressing food loss and waste. Next slide, please. The World Wildlife Fund launched our food loss and waste team in 2016, and since then we've had a strong focus on private sector engagement across farm to fork, and really thinking about how do we work with a coalition of different stakeholders to be able to drive change in this space. So our team has done a lot of work on engaging the private sector through several different initiatives, including the No Food Left Behind platform, as well as the development of a global farm loss tool in partnership with the Consumer Goods Forum. WWF has also worked with global retail partners and food service companies to create platforms such as the US Food Waste Pact and also the Zero Food Waste Coalition. Similarly, we've also done work at the grassroots level, engaging with US schools through our Food Waste Warriors program. Next slide, please. And adjacent to all this work and further supporting our engagement with the private sector is some of the impact investing work that WWF has launched. We've developed a new unit called WWF Impact, which is really addressing how do we help support and scale early stage companies and solutions so that they can help accelerate progress towards many of the key conservation areas that we're focused on as an organization. We've started in the agriculture space, given the climate and biodiversity impacts articulated previously tonight. And also, there's a lack of funding, as Alejandro mentioned. Only 5.5% of venture capital funding went to ag tech investments in 2023. And as discussed, waste and waste in the food system space gets an even smaller portion of this funding. Nonetheless, these solutions are critically important because they address new ideas and can really help accelerate change in this space. Next slide, please. WWF Impact is starting our impact investing work in 3 different areas. We have 3 portfolios. One is aquaculture, one is food circularity, and one is regenerative agriculture. My colleague Pete Pearson, who will be presenting later in this presentation, and I have been co-leading our food circularity investment strategy. And so we're really looking at how do we find these early stage companies and innovations that can help with shifting private sector, shifting supply chains, shifting the production and consumption of food to be more circular and help keep nutrients in the food supply chain and food system. We also have a strong focus for making our investments in the Latin American and Caribbean region, which also gets less funding in general. Only 3.8% of venture capital investment went to Latin America in 2021. So we're really trying to focus our efforts on bringing investment capital to food circularity, which is getting less funding in general, as well as to regions such as Latin America and the Caribbean, which also receive disproportionately less funding. To do so, we work within WWF across our network and our country offices in the region to really identify the most promising, innovative solutions and ideas that drive real conservation impact and community impact on the ground. So next slide, please. Just to illustrate this, we wanted to give an example of the first company in our portfolio, our food circularity portfolio. This company is eCloud, and so they're based in Colombia, and they've developed a software solution that plugs into the backend and inventory management systems of grocery stores and point of sale food retailers to help both on the data analysis and understanding of where surplus food is being generated or food is being wasted within the supply chain and the inventory system for the company. But at the same time, they've also developed a matching platform so that they can help connect surplus food that's still edible from the grocery store or from the point of sale food retailer with local food banks and community organizations to help divert food from the landfill and instead redirect it towards local communities and support local food security. Next slide, please. This is just an example of how early stage companies, private sector companies, particularly grassroots, locally led solutions can have real impacts in their communities and in their ecosystems. And it's one of the reasons why early stage impact first capital that has long time horizons, patient capital is incredibly important in supporting and really helping scale these innovative companies that drive change. Next slide, please. So just to illustrate the potential of scale, which was discussed earlier in this presentation as well, eCloud in less than 4 years has donated over 61 million plates of food and saved over $31 million worth of food with their solution. And so it's another reason why WWF as an environmental organization is really excited about the potential of impact investing and early stage solutions and helping drive change in the private sector as well as along the food production and consumption supply chain to support people and planet. So with that, I'd like to pass it to Marc from Winnow, who will give an entrepreneurial perspective on this work. Thank you.
Thanks, Isabelle. Nice to meet you all. Marc Zornes, one of the founders of Winnow. I'm going to talk today about a couple of things. I'm going to talk about a little bit of food waste in the hospitality sector where we work, introduce you to our solution, and then talk a little bit about the impact that we're having. If you could please go to the presentation. Thanks, and then the next slide. Just in terms of context, right? We talk about food loss and waste, and food waste specifically, but I think it's interesting to also just reflect on the hospitality industry in general. It's one that's been under an incredible amount of turmoil. Going into COVID, a vast majority of the hospitality businesses had to shut down or dramatically change their business models. And then coming out of it, what you saw was very significant food price inflation and labor shortages. This led to, unsurprisingly, some of the highest levels of restaurant closures we've seen in history. But on the good side, as across a number of markets, some of that inflation has abated, and some of the labor markets have leveled out a bit. What we're hearing from our customers is that now centering and focusing on being more profitable, less firefighting, more forward thinking is there. And so now is really the time they're starting to lean in on solutions like this. Next page, please. So when we look at the hospitality industry and specifically in commercial kitchens, and what we mean by that is anywhere where you really eat out of home, what we'd have been able to and sort of unearth and prove is that 5 to 15% of the food that is actually purchased by value in these kitchens is thrown away. And when you scale it up, that's an over $100 billion problem for the sector. And that's just thinking about some of the advanced economies alone. It's more significant that when you look at it worldwide. Next page, and if you actually go one more page just to introduce our technology. So Winnow is a business that helps kitchens to basically run their operations more efficiently. And we do that by developing technology that help the hospitality and food business save money through food waste prevention. Our aim is to save the industry $1 billion per year in what they're spending in food. Today, we're saving over $85 million a year in food costs for our clients. So while that $1 billion is a relatively large number, we're getting closer and closer sort of as we continue to scale. And we do that through really 3 different principles. One is, first and foremost, making a technology that is incredibly easy to use. Any friction in a commercial kitchen means that a process is not going to be followed. And so we really built our system around the concept of it being fully automated, not requiring any user interface, and we've continued to work towards that to where we are today. The second thing is to make it really easy to adopt that technology, simple to onboard, not requiring a lot of configuration, making it easy for chefs to adopt this into their kitchen without having it to be a massive project. And more importantly, being able to demonstrate a payback at its longest case within 6 months, but often within weeks of implementation. And then lastly, all this is really great if you're talking about one kitchen, but the most important thing here is making sure that this is something that can scale. And given our breadth and the number of geographies that we work in, we've proven that this is something that can work worldwide and scale across large organizations who want to set targets to reduce food waste. Next page. So if, just to talk a little bit about the clients that we work with, today, we work in over 90 countries around the world. We're in about 3,000 kitchens around the world. Here is a list of a lot of the clients that we work with. You can see here it's most of the major hotel brands. We'll go into a couple of those in the examples of success that we've had. We work with large, fully integrated, all-inclusive resorts. We work with quick service operations. We work with institutional food service operators like Compass Group, ISS, and others. We also work in cruise lines and casinos. Effectively, anywhere where there's a large amount of food being produced and there's a really meaningful amount of waste, you put Winnow in, we can help you solve that and save money at the same time. Next page. So now just talking a little bit about the technology and sort of it being easy to use. If you can go to the next page, please. So the way that our technology works really simply is we put a camera over where the food's being thrown away, and we put a little low profile scale underneath where the food's being wasted. That system that you're looking at right there, it's looking down into the bin, and every single time food's being thrown away, there is a change in weight. What it's doing is it's looking at what was being thrown away, particularly by looking at what's new in the bin, and then identifying what that product is. On the right-hand side, you can see sort of what the technology is looking at, what it's seeing. Every single time food's being thrown away, it takes a before and after picture of what it was that was in there, identifies what's new, and then using a global computer vision model that's trained on over 300 million different images of food being thrown away, allows it to identify what that product was. Once we know what that product was, and we know how much it was wasted, we can gather other insights, such as how much that cost the business, what the environmental impact of that food waste was, and some of the root causes for why that food was being thrown away. The system is really built to be something that just allows chefs to say, I'm going to throw my food in one location. Winnow's going to take care of capturing all of the data to be able to help me understand my waste and then be able to drive action. Next page. What we then do is we provide analytics, and sort of that data is interesting in and of itself. Actually having a tool to measure food waste is actually really powerful. It does drive some behavior change, but the real value comes when you use those insights to be able to make different decisions. So through things like looking at how much food was wasted, pairing that with how much food is actually being produced, and understanding where you are overproducing food in your operation to adjust your production plans is one example of how we drive that change. Another example might be you'll identify that there's a large amount of sort of trim that's going from specific products, ensuring you're maximizing the yield on those ingredients, or possibly even thinking about how that trim yield, which may be waste built into your menu, could actually be reutilized elsewhere in your menu to be able to save on food costs and put a good quality offer in front of your guests, are all tools and insights you can get from there. This tool rolls up to be able to look at organizations across multiple kitchens to be able to look at performance while being able to help you drill down at the kitchen level to identify the changes that you need to make. Next page. And what that really drives down to, frankly, is a savings on food costs through food waste prevention. If you look at typically what we deliver in optimizing how much is produced, optimizing what they purchase, we're able to save our customers anywhere between 1% to 8% of what they spend on food. If we don't go in then and look at how they optimize the yield of what's actually coming into their kitchen, whether that's how they cut their fruits and vegetables, how they trim their fish and their meats, and so on and so forth, optimizing that, an additional 1 to 2.5% in food costs, and then going and thinking bigger picture how they can re-engineer their menus, we can typically squeeze an additional point out of that. All of that adds up to typically a 2% to 8% food cost savings for our clients, which, considering this is one of their top 2 costs in their business, in a business that's typically relatively tight margins, this can be a real big impact on profitability and a real big improvement in their operation when you get into that. Next slide. And so what we do then through that is we really focus on how we give people a fast payback on the technology. When we first work with them, we set up a baseline, meaning how much they're throwing away today. This is important because, frankly, they don't know how much they're throwing away. It's a hidden cost on their P&L. So we establish that, we understand what they're wasting within the first few weeks. We then identify quick wins with them, and typically within 3 months, we're showing a break-even impact, possibly even showing a profit on the investment in our technology. And then after that, driving further behavior change and then going into optimization, generally we can cut food waste by 50% or more by value and deliver a 200% to 1,000% return on investment for our clients who are putting their money into our technology. Next slide. And so why clients choose us, just going back to that, first of all, it's all really on the ease of use, making it easy to adopt and easy to scale. If you make it something that's really simple to be able to put into a kitchen, make a strong return on investment, then you make solving this very important issue of food waste something that business leaders want to latch onto, something they want to invest in, and something they want to scale across their business. If you can go to the next page. So now I just want to talk a little bit about our impact. So on the next slide, what I'm going to speak to is just kind of how we've grown. When we founded the business about 10 years ago, we first launched the technology really kind of as an IoT device. We invested in computer vision knowing that that was the future. It was a little bit early for us to do it in 2013, but by around 2017, we began the R&D to do that. We launched our vision project and a product in 2019, which was really when we began to scale and sort of drive the impact of the business. We've continued to invest in what we're doing, and we have further technology coming out to help chefs drive kitchens more efficiently. That's going to be released within the next 12 months or so. As you've done that, what you've seen is you've seen the scale of our impact grow from starting off really just a few $100,000 a year in food waste being prevented per annum, as I said, to now over $85 million a year in food costs that we're saving for our clients every year. It's the #1 metric that we track within our business. It's something we seek to maximize, and it's how we deliver value to our clients. If you go to the next page. And so a few case studies of Winnow. One of them is sort of actually someone who's an investor as well in our business, IKEA. IKEA is the first business in the world to cut their food waste in half. Some of you people are on the call may think, boy, don't they make a lot of furniture? Well, actually, they're one of the largest food service operators in the world. Across the 425 stores they've operated in, they've delivered a more than 50% reduction in their business and continuing to drive efficiency, a real great milestone for us to support them on that worldwide. If you look at that next page. And then if you go just at sort of a different sector, speaking specifically to some of our clients in Asia, we did some work about 12 months ago with Mandarin Oriental, proving to them in 4 of their locations that they can make some substantial reductions in their operations. Really, really high-end luxury operation, one that really cares about a high-quality service that they provide to their customers, but demonstrating to them that they can get a real good financial return. And by proving to them that they can see it in their P&L, sharing with them the vision of what they can do, they're now committed to roll Winnow out globally across all their operations, which they're in the process of doing over the next few months. Next page. And then just specifically down at the hotel level, this works sort of in individual properties. Hilton, which is one of our largest hotel clients globally, Hilton Tokyo Bay has adopted our technology, saving about $20,000 a year. On our website, there's a really nice video case study talking about some of the work that I had. So the reason for going through those 3 different examples is just speaking to the fact that this can work in high volume mass market operations. It can work in very high-end luxury operations, and it can work in all types of different hospitality operations. So it has a really broad range of application across the hospitality industry, which is something that we're proud of, and frankly, we need to be able to achieve those food waste goals that we have. I'll go to the next page. And so now I just wanted to close, at least from my side, with a couple of pages just on reflections of how we've grown and some thoughts for the investor community. If you keep going. We've raised about $30 million to date, primarily from impact-focused investors as well as corporate venture capital. A lot of them are European and US based. We do have Temasek Group, ABC Impact, who's invested in our technology as well out in Singapore. Next page. And then, our strongest relationships for investors really came from being built on mission alignment and organizations that will support our mission. When we found investors, people that had the patient capital as we built the market were really key. People that are willing to move quickly and invest with a strong conviction in our business, and those that were willing to lean in and provide commercial introductions really demonstrated value. And so then if I go to my final page, just thinking about reflections for you all as you think about it, as we've actually scaled, we found a few key success factors in scaling this. First of all, making sure that your economic proposition is really clear to be able to drive that scale impact. The money's not going to come from just wanting to do the right thing. It's got to also come from the fact that the economics stand up if you want to get businesses to invest. Although we were able to demonstrate that our product was delivering value, I don't really think we hit product market fit until we made sure that our customers fully recognized that value. And that may seem like kind of a strange question, but in some of these operations, if you don't understand food waste already when you begin, when you're reducing it, making sure they can see that in their P&L and fully internalize that has been an area of a lot of work that we have to do. And then lastly, investing in hardware and software solutions at the same time do require more capital, requires a larger engineering team, a more complex operation, but it does build a nice moat and a competitive advantage long-term as you scale. So with that, I'll close and I'll hand it back to the Refed team to see where we go next. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, Marc, and thanks, Isabelle. Keeping things rolling here, let's jump into the third global action area for investment, which is the importance of changing individual consumer and household behavior and culture regarding food waste. So studies have estimated that by 2030, a 20 to 50% reduction in global food waste could save consumers an estimated $120 to $300 billion a year. So while major food businesses have enormous influence on waste up and down the supply chain, waste at the household level is still really important, and it is a major contributor to the overall problem. But luckily, there are various solutions that already exist and have demonstrated positive results in helping to reduce waste at the household level, including consumer behavior campaigns, which can help to raise awareness about the economic, environmental, and health impacts of overpurchasing and wasting food. There's also other consumer-directed strategies like meal planning or portion balance and shifting to more plant-based, low-carbon diets that can also make a difference. So to hear more about global efforts in this regard, I'd like to welcome Pete, who is the global lead for food loss and waste at World Wildlife Fund, to share what they're learning about what it actually takes to successfully influence consumer behavior and what more needs to be done. So Pete, over to you.
Thank you very much. So the one thing I wanted to highlight is, we've learned a lot about the science in this presentation, and I think there's a couple things that are inevitable if we go to the next slide. One is that consumers have a big portion, in some places, a large portion of the food waste that gets generated. The second thing is that this myth about there being more or less consumer food waste in developed or undeveloped countries is just that. It's a myth. Like, there is food waste no matter where you go in the world. It doesn't matter if you're in a developed country or a developing country. And I think the third point I want to make is there's always going to be some amount of waste, right? We're never going to get to zero. There's never going to be zero food waste. But if we start to think about waste differently, if we start to really identify that waste is a human construct and waste doesn't have to exist, and we have a circular economy, then it totally changes the game. And consumers need to be part of that. We don't have time to go through all of these different examples, but we know that behavior change is a major part of what we have to be doing. Behavior change costs money, and it's very difficult to understand the returns and how much the ROI is for behavior change. But we know that this is something that we cannot keep kicking the can down the road. Future generations, we have to start this behavior change now. We have to start it younger, and we have to get moving on it and invest in it all over the world. One of the examples on the next slide that I want to highlight is, work that we have continually been doing with the hotel and hospitality industry. So one of our strategies is, you have consumer behavior changes where you might think this is an ad council campaign or TV commercials or advertising. But one of the areas that we think is really promising is to go where people are working, especially in the food industry. And then when you have the food industry learning about how they can change things within the business, using examples like the Winnow technology, that translates to an understanding of why it's important, and then they can bring that back home. And so we've worked really hard to identify these behavior changes in the hospitality industry. We've been at this for 6 or 7 years now, and it's starting to pay dividends. We've worked very closely with the American Hotel and Lodging Association. We've worked a lot with the hotel industry, but we've learned one key thing. Just working with a set of individual actors and businesses is not enough. This has to be something that we do across the entire ecosystem of food service businesses. And when I say that, I mean, it's not just the hotels that have to change. It's also the clients, the people that are actually trying to sign up and organize events. It's also the meeting planners, right? It's the whole ecosystem of engagement that has to fundamentally start changing. And we have to start talking about requirements to reduce waste as part of this. One of the things we've done is we've started to really look at meeting planning globally, and how when you start to do this kind of work, you have to have all those different elements and all the different clientele and the meeting planners be part of this behavior change. And we've put together what we're calling dream events now, where you have donation, you have recovery, you have all these requirements that mean we're going to have food waste be part of the conversation. And I think this is really important. This is the type of work that needs to be replicated in different industries, not just the hospitality industry, but it needs to go into grocery retail. It needs to go into, corporate campuses and companies like Compass Group and Sodexo. Like, this stuff needs to be built into every kitchen all over the world. Next slide. The one thing that we are also investing in, and there's a strong recognition in the US especially, that these consumer campaigns do add value. So this was back around 2015, 2016, there was a Save the Food campaign that was sponsored through the Ad Council. And this hit households all over the US. It was an awareness campaign that was started. And this really started to elevate food waste as an issue in the United States. And this is the type of campaigning that other countries need to replicate and model from. The only issue with this is that it costs money. And a lot of times these campaigns have to be catalyzed and spurred from public sector investments. So governments have to see the value, and they have to help seed these investments into consumer campaigns. But then the private sector needs to jump in and also be part of this. And we'll see there was a call to action through the Environmental Protection Agency in the US to do a large-scale campaign in the United States. It's yet to be seen if that's going to be something that remains in the budget given the new administration, but we're really hopeful. And I think we see that this issue, especially in the public sector, tends to be one of the most nonpartisan, bipartisan issues where people from all political spectrums agree to this, and they agree why that's important and why these public sector investments are important. So I'm super optimistic. I think this particular issue is going to remain one that is important no matter what type of government system you're looking at. And I think when that does happen, I think we need to embrace it. We need to show the world that this is something that, everybody can invest in and that we can all agree on as a major solution. So with that, those are a couple examples of what we're doing in the private sector and in the hospitality sector. And then this is one example you should check out, savethefood.com, that hopefully will have a continuation in the United States and a whole set of funding over the next 5 years. I'll turn it back to the ReFed team, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Awesome. I agree with you, Pete. Would love to see that and very excited for what's to come. Awesome. Well, we are on our 4th of 5th investment action areas. So we're getting close to the end here, and we will see if we have time for Q&A, but it's been such a rich presentation set from the group. So let's jump in on our 4th action area here, which is all about policy. So policymakers really have an important role to play in regulating markets to incentivize efficiency and circular economy, and also to disincentivize waste. This includes establishing waste reduction strategies and programs to helping develop measurement standards and protocols, as well as providing training services, infrastructure, and investing in innovation. Key policies that are shaping food loss and waste can include things like bans on organic materials in landfill, government funding for R&D, support for cold chain infrastructure, and guidance on food safety and food donation, as you'll hear a little bit more about from our next speaker. So to jump into that, to learn about the global policy landscape, how important policy is in driving positive reductions in food waste and hunger relief efforts specifically, plus ways that funders can support such initiatives, I'd like to welcome Ana Catalina to speak, who is the Senior Director of Strategy and Innovation at the Global Food Banking Network. So Ana Catalina, over to you.
Hi, Alexandria. Hi, everyone. I want to start by saying thank you, Project Drawdown and ReFed, for make these spaces possible. And Pete, absolutely, I'm optimistic too. I really believe that things are changing. Many people is working to transform the food systems and of course to include the most vulnerable people into the conversation. Because when we are speaking about food systems, we need to talk about climate, we need to speak about adaptation and how the most vulnerable are getting better tools for the climate change. Hi, everyone. As Alexandra was saying, my name is Ana Catalina. I'm based normally in Bogota, Colombia. I am more intelligent and fun in Spanish, but I'm going to do my best in English. I was working with the government during 15 years in charge of the poverty alleviation programs and food security. I was a lawyer before. I'm still having my mind as a lawyer. I was the director for the National Network of Food Banks in Colombia for 5 years too. And being there, we were working in how policy drives action on food loss and waste. We helped the government to work in the food loss and waste policy, and we are going to see how policy in different countries are helping us to create a better legal framework for companies, for researchers, for academy, and for NGOs and civil society, academy, to reduce and prevent food loss and waste. In the next slide, we are going to see a question. How many countries have national food loss and waste strategies? And before, I hope that you are thinking how many we have. Let's say that we are more than 195 countries in the world. I would like to ask you a personal question. Don't answer me, don't worry, don't answer in the chat, it's just for you. When was the last time that you throw away food? Now, in this slide, we have the answer about how many countries have national food loss and waste strategies. 12 countries. 12 countries have defined a national food loss and waste strategies, and 24 have incorporated inside their NDCs something about food loss and waste, correlated in some cases to methane, in some cases to the food security strategies. And I was asking you about when was the last time that you throw away food, because this is a personal issue. This is something that is related to us as an individuals, but at the same time, it's an organizational issue. Then it's important to understand that we are waking up. We have been waking up about how food loss and waste is impacting climate, how food loss and waste is impacting, of course, everything related to nutrition too. I would like in the next slide to present you GFN, The Global Foodbanking Network is a non-profit organization spanning more than 50 countries dedicated to the global of nourishing people and the planet together. Our impact in 2023 was we served 40 million people with food, where 60% of the total food that we provided was high nutritional food. Food that in other cases was going to be wasted or lost. 600 people serve, 600,000 people serve, and 1.8 million metric tons of CO2 emissions avoided. In the next slide, you are going to see that we are working in more than 54 country partners, the majority of them in the Global South. And all the work that we are doing is with more than 75,000 organizations that are serving vulnerable people on the field. Why is policy necessary? We believe that realigning the incentives, the government decisions, and business is going to help us to accelerate the decision-making process, to make the commitments that the different organizations are doing in a reality. This is going to give the policy makers tools and resources to force solutions, but at the same time is helping us with more cross-functional cooperation, government, business, and civil society. That triad is becoming more and more important every day. We know that the public problems as hunger and climate change cannot be resolved just by the government. We need the intervention from business and civil society. Increasing the awareness about food loss and waste as a public problem that we need to resolve together. And at the end, policy is necessary because help us to drive change across society. It's for that in 2019, in cooperation with the Harvard Law School's Food Law and Policy Clinic, we started the Global Food Donation Policy Atlas. We had been reviewing 25 countries. We created an interactive map, evaluate and analyze the countries by 9 perspectives and provide recommendations based in their own experience. In that work, in this next slide, we are seeing the 9 core policy areas to date that we have been analyzing. And I would like to highlight the new last ones that we are working and we want to update it is the food waste deterrence policies and the emissions, environmental and food waste reporting. We believe that when the country is reporting on what they are doing, if they have food loss and waste strategies, if they are incorporating food loss and waste in their own indices, is going to help us to accelerate the conversation about food loss and waste in general. In the next slide, we are seeing why I'm saying that I'm optimistic, as Pete was saying. The momentum is growing. Since 2019, working in 25 countries, we have been seeing how every country has been growing in their own policies. Just to mention some of them, 6 countries advanced in their national food loss and waste laws, for example. In the next slide, we are seeing that this work is not possible without any strategic investment. And the strategic investment is a process, it's an ecosystem that is creating. With the investment we can do analysis and research. After that, based on that evidence-based analysis, we can advocate for a better laws. We can create a policy change movement, and after we can create the impact of preventing and reducing food loss and waste. Just what is the next? I know that people is here. We believe that expand the analysis to more countries is very important. 25 out of more than 200 countries that we have in the world has been analyzed. It's a really good evidence base that is working, but we need to scale up with the work that we are doing. Expand from donation to a more understandable food loss and waste policies. We know that donation is a key element, as we saw in the environmental program administration, new hierarchy pyramid we saw with the European Commission. We need to increase the amount of food that we are donating or redistributing to have a better impact. We want to create more toolkits for policymakers and business. And I have to say, this is a peer-to-peer learning process. We are not creating the knowledge. What we are doing is understanding what every country is doing, how they are doing the work, what has been successful, and based on that, creating some formulas that in some countries are applicable, and in other countries it's going to be other formula, but putting all the elements together to help the policymakers to apply all of them. And in additional direct support to food bankers and other local actors to advance advocacy and awareness. Have in mind that civil society are key actors in the policy change processes. Doesn't exist any public policy without civil society. Alexandra, I hope that I was in time, and I hope that we have time for questions, because questions are really very important for us too. Then I hope that we did it.
No, that was great, Ana Catalina. Thank you so much. I'm not sure that we will have time for questions today, because there is one final action area that I just want to mention really quickly, because I think it's so important and really wraps things up beautifully here. This, of course, is the opportunity to support individuals and organizations that can champion and coordinate all the work that we've been talking about today on the line. So moving to the next slide, if it's already blatantly obvious to everyone, let me just reiterate that in order to truly make inroads on this global phenomenon that is food loss and waste, we need to make sure that all efforts are highly coordinated at the systems level and strategic in nature. And as such, there really is an important role for organizations and alliances, coalitions, and collaborations to be mapping the landscape and identifying priorities for interventions across types of capital, tracking progress, and identifying useful tools and expertise. Many of the organizations that the speakers on today's webinar represent are what I would consider field catalysts who play this role. And as you can tell from the smattering of other logos that are on this slide, there are many other organizations just like this around the globe that all represent a crucial subset of actors or sectors throughout the food system, all of which have their own unique expertise and value to add.